During a live webinar on Tuesday, Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng shared his thoughts on government's approach to the Isreal-Palestinian conflict. The webinar was organized by the Jerusalem Post, where he expressed his love for Israel and tactically accused Pretoria of diplomatic hypocrisy over its stance on the Middle East conflict. Have a look at this.
The overwhelming majority of South Africans of African descent are landless. They don't have land. Why? Because the colonialists came and took away the land that belongs to them. The colonialists came and took the wealth that belongs to them. And that has never stopped. To date, in South Africa and in Africa, people are landless and some are wallowing in poverty, and yet South Africa and the whole of the continent of Africa is rich in fertile soil, rich with water, rich with mineral resources. Have we cut diplomatic ties with our previous colonizers? Have we embarked on a disinvestment campaign against those that are responsible for untold suffering in South Africa and the continent of Africa? Did Israel take away our land? Did Israel take away the land of Africa? Did Israel take the mineral wealth of South Africa and of Africa? So we've got to move from a position of principle here. I cannot, as a Christian, do anything other than love and pray for Israel, because I know hatred for Israel by me and for my nation can only attract unprecedented curses upon our nation. So what do I think should happen? I think, as a citizen of this great country, that we are denying ourselves a wonderful opportunity of being a game changers in the Israeli-Palestinian situation.
Now, on the back of that, the ANC has since warned the Chief Justice against entering the political terrain and also reiterated its support for the people of Palestine. To discuss this matter further, we are joined on the line by social analyst Tessa Dooms. Tessa, thank you for your time and thank you for joining us once more on Weekend Dawn. Now, surely this bringing the Bible into the Israel-Palestine issue isn't a good thing for the Chief Justice and his office?
Yeah, so people who hold high public office in this country need to remember that we are a secular state, which means we separate out religion from the operations of the state, and our state constitution and our state dealings are not based on religion. And so while we have religious freedom, we don't have the freedom to overlap our religious beliefs with the functions of the state. And I think that's where the treacherous waters for the Chief Justice begin. But I think more importantly, there are theological questions that need to be asked about his interpretation of things, because it is his interpretation as a Christian, where there are other Christians who don't feel the same way that he does. But whether or not he should be pronouncing on his faith on such a political matter is something we really need to take seriously.
Can there be any action taken against the Chief Justice? Is there a chance for us to take action maybe against the office, for instance?
No, I don't think so. And it's a bit of a double-edged sword. If you think about a place like the USA, we know what a lot of the political leanings are of those in the judiciary, particularly those in the Supreme Court in the US. And in our justice system, we pretend, and I say pretend because we'd like to believe that in theory the judiciary should be objective and not subject to their own views, but we know that that's not how human nature works. And so it's not a bad thing that we understand the political or moral leanings of the judiciary. It becomes a problem if it starts to influence their work. And so it's a contentious issue. It's something that we must take seriously, something that we should be cautioned around, so that we can see if it influences the way he does his work. But I don't think that there's a direct sanction on him holding that view, but expressing it does become difficult because the public then get to see beyond the black robe.
But then surely the Judicial Service Commission needs to, I don't know, slap on the wrist or give him a warning of some sorts, or is that not something they should do either?
So what would they be warning him against? Holding the view, expressing it to a media outlet? I think that it's not about sanction as much as it is about prudence. And I think that the Chief Justice needs to ask himself, is the way he's conducting himself prudent? Is it helpful to the South African political discourse for him to interject his religious views and his political views into the public domain, even though it's not in the course of his work per se? If the president, for instance, came out in support of murder or colonialism or something that we find morally or politically problematic, even if he wasn't doing it in his capacity as the president at the time, we would then have to question his standing on those issues and take them on. But we also need to question whether he understands the power that that he holds when he's in that office.
And then this obviously puts a cloud above his head when adjudicating anything that's got to do with human rights matters.
Right, and especially if you think about the kinds of things that we're talking about here. We're talking about human rights issue, we're talking about a social justice issue, because at the heart of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is really a question about social justice, human rights, dispossession, and he rightfully makes reference to colonialism and points out that there may be a level of hypocrisy in us, not sanctioning our colonizers. But equally, you can't have a double standard. He can't have a double standard himself, where he's calling out one party for voting with a colonizer when Palestine is occupied. And so it's just he needs to show that he is somebody who's reasoned in his views, but that he respects human rights, he respects social justice, and that he himself does not hold the double standards he's accusing the ANC of.
What about an organization like Africa for Palestine now laying a complaint with the Judicial Service Commission? Will that prompt the Judicial Service Commission to do something to the Chief Justice?
I think that it's an interesting point for them to do it. I think that he should need to clarify his views and his stance, because again, it's a question of our own constitution, our own values, human rights across the board, and whether or not he respects those. There's also an international precedent around these issues. There is a national precedent in terms of what the governing party and our government stance is on the Palestinian and Israeli issue. And so it's right that he's held accountable for those utterances, but whether or not that can lead to sanction is a different issue.
So if he had made these views on a lesser platform, maybe just locally or even at church, would that be something that would be okay? But maybe because it was done on an international platform, on a webinar with many other people, do you think it's got more of outrage because of that?
Well, the more public it is and the kinds of platform it's on, but that he holds those views is already in itself something that's worth questioning and it's worth taking on, and that he's willing to share them in public platforms is secondary. Whether it was a local platform or an international platform, I don't think would be either here or there. If he said it in the comfort of his home around his family and friends, I don't think anyone would be perturbed. But he intentionally did make that a public statement, and he clearly had thought it through before he did that interview.
I saw a tweet earlier this week about Mandla Mandela saying the Chief Justice must resign if he stands by his remarks, supporting what he called apartheid Israel. Do you maybe share the same sentiments?
I think the Chief Justice is going to be put under a lot of pressure to back up his views, not because of the ANC holding that view or because of the legacy of Nelson Mandela, but because there is a global push around the question of the human rights violations and the social justice issues. And we have to remember that the Bible itself was used to justify many injustices in history. Slavery, colonialism, the disposition of our own land was justified using the Bible. And so there's a long tradition of people standing in solidarity with the oppressed and with the dispossessed, including ourselves under apartheid. And I think that we owe it to stand in solidarity with others who are oppressed, and especially when it's coming from somebody at such high office in our own ranks.
I think to retract or not to retract is the question now that will probably be posed to the Chief Justice. Just in closing, Tessa, do you think retracting would be able to save his image?
I don't think the Chief Justice should retract for the sake of calming sentiment. I think the Chief Justice needs to engage these views deeply, and I think if he wants to have a public debate and if he wants to have a public conversation, he must be willing to deal with the consequence of his view and what that means for our confidence in him as a nation, and what that may even reveal about his own sense of justice.
Tessa, we'll leave it right there. Thank you for your time. That was social analyst Tessa Dooms weighing in on the remarks made by Chief Justice Mogoeng Mogoeng on government's approach to the Israel-Palestinian conflict.